The Potter family. This story begins centuries ago, but their most famous chapter starts with James Potter, a talented wizard who attended Hogwarts in the 1970s. James came from a long line of pure-blood wizards, meaning his ancestors had been magical for generations without any non-magical people marrying into the family. However, the Potters were different from other pure-blood families. They never believed that magical blood made them superior to others. James Potter fell in love with Lily Evans, a brilliant witch born to non-magical parents. This made her what the wizarding world calls a Muggle-born. When James and Lily married, their future children would technically be considered half-bloods because one parent came from a non-magical family. But blood status meant nothing to the Potters. They cared about character, not ancestry. The Potter family possessed several remarkable magical traits that passed down through generations. They showed exceptional skill at defensive magic, particularly spells that protected others from harm. They also demonstrated unusual resistance to dark magic, as if their very nature rejected evil influences. Most importantly, Potters throughout history displayed extraordinary courage when facing impossible odds. When Lily and James had their son Harry in 1980, they unknowingly brought forth the wizard who would change the magical world forever. The Potter bloodline carried an ancient magic within it, the power of self-sacrificing love. This wasn't just sentiment, it was literal magical protection that could shield others from even the most deadly curses. This protection would prove crucial when baby Harry survived the killing curse that destroyed the dark wizard Voldemort. The Black family represents one of the oldest and wealthiest pure-blood dynasties in wizarding Britain. For nearly 1,000 years, they maintained their bloodline by marrying only other pure-blood wizards, often marrying their own cousins to keep magical blood pure. Their family motto, always pure, revealing their core obsession with blood status above all else. The Blacks accumulated enormous wealth and political influence over centuries. They owned multiple properties, including the Grim townhouse at Grimmauld Place in London, which became their ancestral home. Their wealth came from investments in magical businesses, property ownership, and careful marriages that combined fortunes. This money gave them significant power in wizarding government and society. However, the Black family's obsession with blood purity created a toxic family culture. They practiced disowning family members who showed any sympathy toward non-magical people or Muggle-borns. The family literally burned the names of blood traitors off their family tree tapestry, erasing them from family history. Children grew up learning that their worth came from their ancestry rather than their actions or character. This twisted worldview produced vastly different outcomes in Black family members. Some, like Bellatrix Black Lestrange, became fanatical followers of dark wizards, torturing and killing anyone they deemed inferior. Others, like Sirius Black, completely rejected their family's beliefs and fought against everything the Black name represented. The family's story shows how an obsession with blood purity could either corrupt a person completely or drive them to rebel entirely against their heritage. The Malfoy family built their legacy on wealth, political manipulation, and an unwavering belief in pure blood superiority. For generations, they positioned themselves as aristocrats of the wizarding world, using their fortune and influence to shape magical society according to their beliefs. The Malfoys owned Malfoy Manor, a grand estate in Wiltshire, which served as both their home and a symbol of their elevated status above other wizarding families. Lucius Malfoy mastered the art of political influence during the late 20th century. He donated large sums of money to important institutions like St. Mungo's Hospital and various Ministry of Magic departments, ensuring that powerful people owed him favors. When making decisions, ministry officials often considered what the Malfoys wanted because they depended on Malfoy financial support. This system allowed Lucius to influence laws and policies from behind the scenes. The family's obsession with blood purity led them to support Lord Voldemort's rise to power. They believed that pure blood wizards should rule over half-bloods, Muggle-borns, and non-magical people. Lucius became a Death Eater, one of Voldemort's inner circle, and used his home as headquarters for planning attacks against those they considered inferior. The Malfoys saw Voldemort's movement as a way to create a world where families like theirs would hold absolute power. However, their alliance with dark magic came with terrible costs. When Voldemort returned to power, he treated the Malfoys as servants rather than partners, taking over their home and threatening their lives. Young Draco Malfoy discovered that following his family's beliefs meant living in constant fear and committing acts that horrified him. The Malfoy story reveals how the pursuit of power through hatred ultimately destroys even those who think they benefit from it. The Weasley family proves that blood status means nothing compared to character and values. Though technically purebloods with magical ancestors stretching back generations, the Weasleys rejected everything that other pureblood families represented. Arthur Weasley worked at the Ministry of Magic in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, a department that most pureblood wizards considered beneath them. His genuine fascination with non-magical people and their inventions made other pureblood families view the Weasleys as blood traitors. Arthur and Molly Weasley raised 7 children in a cramped but loving home called the Burrow. Despite having very little money, they created a warm household where every person felt valued regardless of their blood status. The Weasley parents taught their children to judge people by their actions and kindness rather than their ancestry. This upbringing produced children who became some of the bravest defenders against dark magic in their generation. The family's financial struggles came from Arthur's choice to work in a low-paying government job rather than pursue wealth through pure blood connections. Other pureblood families could have offered the Weasleys money and status in exchange for supporting blood purity beliefs, but Arthur and Molly refused to compromise their values. They preferred honest poverty over wealth gained through prejudice and hatred. When Voldemort returned to power, the Weasley family immediately joined the fight against him, even though this put their lives in terrible danger. They opened their home to Harry Potter, knowing it made them targets. Their willingness to sacrifice everything for their beliefs about equality and justice made them true heroes. The Weasley bloodline shows that courage and love matter far more than ancient magical ancestry. The Longbottom family carries one of the most tragic yet heroic stories in wizarding history. Frank and Alice Longbottom were highly skilled Aurors, the elite magical law enforcement officers who hunted down dark wizards during Voldemort's first rise to power. They specialized in capturing Death Eaters and protecting innocent families from dark magic attacks. Their reputation for bravery and magical skill made them prime targets for Voldemort's followers who wanted revenge. After Voldemort's initial defeat in 1981, 4 escaped Death Eaters led by Bellatrix Lestrange captured Frank and Alice Longbottom. These dark wizards used the Cruciatus Curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses that causes unbearable pain, to torture the Longbottoms for information about Voldemort's whereabouts. The torture continued for hours until Frank and Alice's minds completely broke from the agony. They lost all memory of their previous lives, unable to recognize their own son or remember their own names. This attack left young Neville Longbottom to be raised by his stern grandmother, Augusta Longbottom. She constantly worried that Neville had inherited none of his parents' magical talent or courage, often comparing him unfavorably to Frank and Alice's legendary abilities. This pressure made Neville incredibly nervous and self-doubting throughout his early years at Hogwarts, where other students saw him as clumsy and incompetent at magic. However, the Longbottom bloodline's true nature revealed itself when Neville faced real danger. During his 7th year, when Death Eaters controlled Hogwarts, Neville led student resistance efforts and endured brutal punishments without breaking. His courage culminated in destroying Voldemort's final Horcrux, proving that the Longbottom legacy of bravery had never disappeared. It simply needed the right moment to emerge from years of hidden strength. The Lestrange family once held a respectable position among pure-blood wizarding families, but their story became forever tainted by their most infamous member's descent into murderous fanaticism. Bellatrix Black married into the Lestrange family, bringing with her the Black family's obsession with blood purity, but she took these beliefs to extremes that horrified even other Death Eaters. Her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange created a partnership built on shared hatred rather than love, united only by their worship of Lord Voldemort. Bellatrix Lestrange became Voldemort's most devoted follower, treating him like a god rather than simply a leader. While other Death Eaters followed Voldemort for power or fear, Bellatrix genuinely believed that serving him was her life's highest purpose. She practiced dark magic with gleeful cruelty, perfecting torture curses and killing spells not just as tools, but as expressions of her twisted devotion. Her skill at dark magic surpassed most other Death Eaters, making her one of Voldemort's most dangerous weapons. The Lestrange family's participation in the torture of Frank and Alice Longbottom represents the darkest chapter in their history. Along with Barty Crouch Jr., Bellatrix and Rodolphus Lestrange spent hours using the Cruciatus Curse on the Aura couple, destroying their minds in pursuit of information about their fallen master. This act of prolonged torture shocked even the wizarding world's most hardened law enforcement officials, earning the Lestranges life sentences in Azkaban prison. However, Bellatrix's fanaticism proved stronger than Azkaban's soul-crushing effects. When she escaped from prison, she immediately resumed her role as Voldemort's most trusted lieutenant, continuing to torture and kill with the same enthusiasm she had shown before her imprisonment. The Lestrange name became synonymous with the complete corruption that results when noble bloodlines embrace absolute evil. The Dumbledore family story begins with a forbidden love that changed wizarding history forever. Percival Dumbledore, a pure-blood wizard, fell in love with Kendra, a Muggle-born witch whose non-magical parents had produced a daughter with extraordinary magical abilities. Their marriage created what the wizarding world classified as half-blood children, though this mixed heritage actually enhanced rather than diminished their magical potential. The Dumbledore bloodline combined the ancient magical knowledge of pure-blood families with the fresh perspective and determination that often characterized Muggle-born wizards. Tragedy struck the Dumbledore family when young Ariana accidentally revealed her magic to local Muggle boys, who attacked her in fear and confusion. This trauma damaged Ariana's ability to control her magic, creating dangerous outbursts of uncontrolled magical energy. Percival Dumbledore attacked the boys who hurt his daughter, earning himself a life sentence in Azkaban prison, where he eventually died. The family moved frequently to hide Ariana's condition, with Kendra taking full responsibility for caring for her damaged daughter while raising two other brilliant sons. The burden of family secrets shaped both Albus and Aberforth Dumbledore's characters in profound ways. Albus, the eldest, felt responsible for his family's welfare after their father's imprisonment and mother's death in one of Ariana's magical accidents. This early experience with tragedy and responsibility taught him to carry enormous burdens alone, a trait that would define his later role as the wizarding world's protector against dark magic. His guilt over his family's suffering made him extremely cautious about pursuing personal happiness over duty. The Dumbledore bloodline produced two of the most magically gifted wizards of their generation, but their mixed heritage meant they never quite belonged to either pureblood or Muggle-born communities. This outsider perspective allowed them to see beyond the prejudices that divided the wizarding world, making them natural defenders of equality and justice. The Riddle family story reveals the most dangerous irony in wizarding history. The wizard who terrorized the world with pure-blood supremacy was himself a half-blood. Tom Marvolo Riddle's mother, Merope Gaunt, came from one of the oldest pure-blood families in Britain, descendants of Salazar Slytherin himself. However, centuries of inbreeding had left the Gaunt family mentally unstable, violently poor, and barely capable of performing magic despite their prestigious ancestry. Merope fell in love with Tom Riddle Sr., a wealthy Muggle who lived in the nearby village of Little Hangleton. Merope used love potions to enchant the Muggle Tom Riddle, forcing him into a relationship that produced a son. When she stopped giving him the potion, hoping he would love her naturally, Tom Sr. immediately abandoned her and their unborn child. Merope died shortly after giving birth, leaving her son in a Muggle orphanage with only a name connecting him to his father. Young Tom Riddle grew up knowing nothing about his magical heritage, surrounded by non-magical people who feared his strange abilities and violent behavior. The discovery of his mixed blood became Tom Riddle's greatest source of shame and rage. When he learned that his father was a Muggle who had abandoned his witch mother, Tom felt betrayed by both sides of his heritage. His pure-blood ancestors had become pathetic outcasts, while his Muggle father had rejected magic entirely. This rejection fueled Tom's transformation into Lord Voldemort, a new identity that denied both his Muggle name and his half-blood status. He convinced himself and others that he represented pure-blood supremacy, despite being the very thing he claimed to despise. The Riddle Bloodline story demonstrates how self-hatred can become the most destructive force in the world. Tom Riddle's inability to accept his own mixed heritage drove him to create a movement that would have destroyed everything that made him who he was, proving that the greatest evil often springs from the deepest personal shame. We explored how different bloodlines, from the revered Potters to the infamous Lestranges, shape the characters and events of the wizarding world. Ultimately, it is a person's choices, not their ancestry, that determine their destiny.